Dear Brandy, yesterday was your first day of school. You and Mom went to the mall to pick out a super dope outfit, an outfit that matches your charismatic personality, one that screams, "I don't need attention," only to realize that your outfit was just a shell, an outfit that your daddy bought but never saw you wear. Brandy, you'll begin to realize that there are many outfits that you wore to cover your trauma. The reward was never in the clothes. It was discovering what you were masking and smothering. Brandy, there will be a time for you to wear a different outfit. An outfit equipped to deliver daughters. An outfit that's going to have you face your triggers on and say, "Today I wear nothing." Letter to my 8-year-old self. When I was 8 years old, I didn't realize that what I was experiencing could later fuel a mental health diagnosis. Most people believe, including my past self, is that our current mental health status is in direct connection with our adult experiences. Our perceptions of children can be that they are to be seen and not heard, and that the things that transpire in their lives, they'll somehow just forget and move forward. And for a mere moment in my life, I too did a really good job at masking my fears. I thought that every little girl lived life without a father. That's the crazy thing about the concept of nature versus nurture. My environment literally shaped my expectations. So I had to sit with that 8-year-old girl, because if I didn't unmask my traumas, it would later show up in my relationships, my friendships, and how I carried myself into this world. And when I got done talking to her, she told me to show up more consciously, not only for me, but for my children and their children, because I refuse to leave a story written of pain. I'd rather for my legacy to be built on purpose. So the beginning of my rebirth was in connection to my passion in supporting others and the birth of my first daughter, Kennedy. I found myself pregnant at 21, just about to graduate college, and when I carried her in my womb, I made my manifestation so clear. I knew that if I was going to give birth to her, that I wanted to do it right. And by right, I wanted to assure that she was going to receive the best outcomes. I'm not even sure where that idea came from, other than knowing that if my father wanted the same for me, maybe I wouldn't be pregnant so young in the first place. But the universe has a funny way of shifting you, making you move in ways that make you show up as your best self. The birth of Kennedy was in direct connection to me becoming a social worker. I literally immersed myself in careers where I was supporting or learning about children. So I began to work with the juvenile population. My goal for that population was simply to help them life plan, give them some basic skills that can help them go a long way. But I constantly found myself frustrated by the lack of progress and constant recidivism. I was going in and out of homes of 12 to 18-year-olds and their families who exemplify what it meant to have learned behavior. They were so deep in their cycles, and I'm guessing it was hard to see a way out. I knew that if I wanted to continue to do this work, that I needed to be in environments where I was discovering the why. It is then that I learned that 50% of mental health diagnoses are given to children under the age of 14. So I decided that I was going to go back and receive my master's, and I began to hear the terms early prevention, early intervention. Terms used to describe the need to support a child in the most critical part of their development, ages 0 to 6. It's at that time that a child's brain literally doubles in size and almost is fully grown. So at the cusp of me graduating with my master's, and I had my second daughter, Carter, I found myself planted in an early childhood mental health program with Nationwide Children's Hospital. At the same time, I was beginning to cultivate my own family, but I couldn't rejoice. I was trying to translate the things that I learned to how I was becoming a mother myself. I began to receive some of the best supervision and have some of the best trainings in which I was told that children only thrive in connection to the work that the caregiver puts in. Research tells us that when one trusted adult is in the life of a child in the first year in life, they can receive the best outcomes. But then I began to get triggered by watching my husband be a father to our children. He fathered beautifully, what appeared to my fresh eyes as perfectly. He led with intention, and everything he did moving forward, I knew that my girls were a priority. But it was the small, most simple moments that triggered me. The kisses on their forehead, the books at bedtime, the wiping of the tears when they fell. And then came their response, their confidence, their trust in him, their faces when he walked into any room. I wanted that. I needed that. And the more I witnessed it, the more pain I felt. So I naturally just placed that energy into work, learning about concepts of parenting and early childhood mental health that I had never heard before. It forced me to begin to dig into my roots and the roots of others. I was supporting caregivers who told me stories of long histories of ancestral trauma. I would talk to both mothers and fathers who told me about their own suffering. I would sit on living room floors with grandmothers and grandfathers who had custody of their grandchildren because of the way that they had parented their children themselves. It forced me to investigate more, and it led me to the concept of epigenetics. Epigenetics tells us how. Take a moment to ponder. Are there things that you learn simply from watching, observing your parents? And are there things that you innately inherit, like in your bloodstreams, like oceans to rivers? Epigenetics tells us, just like diabetes, that trauma can be passed down. In the most simple of terms, we now know that you can inherit things outside your DNA sequence of genes. So yes, your temperament is part of your biology. Watching your parents physically fight to problem solve, that's how you become to learn about how to deal with conflict. So I had the reason to do the healing work. I knew that the blame was not supposed to be on my father and the fathers before him. Is it that our parents parent us from a place in which they were raised? And if we really wanted to take it there, can we think of our ancestors who have been stripped away from their children to be taught to disconnect from their families as a way to push a slave agenda? It is those same traumas that stick to us, and those same traumas that make us parent from a place of fear rather than comfort. Because if I knew that my baby would be sold tomorrow or today, be killed by a police officer simply for being black, or that I just had to afford my child's next meal, my priority in parenting would only be to survive, not to thrive. And I would have to witness the survival and the parents and the caregivers that I worked with. I would see family trees with branches of addiction, abuse, neglect, and limited attachment. And so I was seeing an influx of behavioral disorders that showed up in children that looked like mania, bipolar, ADHD, and ODD. The treatment focus was always in repairing the caregiver and child relationship, and really thinking about what were caregivers holding on to themselves. And so I had to begin to ask the people that I work with and myself questions like, Tell me a little bit about your family tree. Are there times that you wish that your mother and father had showed up for you and they didn't? Are you giving your children a childhood that they would have to recover from? And those answers were really hard in real time because I found myself doing things naturally, like a body reflex. I would get mad and scream and yell at my kids, and then on the opposite end, I wouldn't give them boundaries at all. It was draining. I knew that I had to continue the journey of self-healing. And when I was done, this is what it looks like in real time. It meant me giving quality time with my children versus quantities of time. It meant me indulging in their framework of learning, which was play, and giving them positive attention. It meant me apologizing for mismanaging my temper. There is nothing more humbling than doing something wrong to your child, sitting with that guilt, coming back to them and saying, "I'm sorry." It forced me to stop using a belt and to use disciplinary strategies that were based upon teaching and modeling the behavior that I wanted to see. I adjusted my expectations to meet where they were developmentally, and most importantly, I let them be little, with the understanding that they are still growing and learning, and I am too. And guess what? It's working. Not perfectly, because there are times that I still take my time outs and I still have to tag team my husband, and sometimes I simply lose my shit. But I always keep a mental health framework in mind. I began at the same time to go online and showcase my wisdom through pictures. I began to mix a little bit of that with my education, my background, and knowledge, and it's there where I branded my motherhood magic. A place where parents could go to challenge the ideas that they heard from their ancestors, and if they were of benefit, people were willing to keep them. But if they learned something new, they were willing to let it go. At the same time, I transitioned into a school setting, and I began to educate teachers on meeting the social and emotional needs of children in the classroom, and that we build a child's academic success by meeting their most basic needs, especially ones rooted in relationship building. And so for me, my awakening has came from reparenting, going back to the place in which I was wronged as a child and telling her, "I'm sorry that happened to you." I want my daughters to know that the best gift that I can give them is the gift of mending myself. I am no good to anyone if I am no good to myself. When I think about the values that I want to leave my children, they are those of self-love. I want my girls to know that they can't pour from an empty cup. And so I want for you guys to challenge yourselves, to show up stronger as individuals. And something I like to teach people around me and adults around me, because I think at some point we're all responsible for touching the life of a child, even if you're not a parent yourself. So think of it like this. When you get on an airplane, in case there's an emergency, before you place the oxygen mask on your child, you place it on yourself first. You are no good to anyone if you can't do the work for yourself, because you have to show up better as an individual. Individually, you will be able to show up stronger in your family. Your family will be able to build stronger communities, and the communities will be able to build the resiliency of an entire culture, starting with our youngest people. There's an antidote to the curse, and it starts with you. Hello, My name is Brandy Wells, and I'm an independently licensed social worker and conscious mother of 3. I live in King Lincoln District with my husband and 3 daughters, where my mother and her siblings were raised by my grandmother and grandfather. I am filled with so much gratitude tonight, and I hope that you hear my purpose in life, and it's worth sharing. Thank you.